There is a law older than most civilizations currently alive. It predates the Cooperative Sphere by 6,000 years. It predates the Vaothari hegemony's founding charter. It predates the Solen Imperium's unification, the Thalmuri's philosophical revolution, the Coelvereth's first mathematical proof. It is older than most of the institutions that now administer it, older than the languages in which it is currently written, old enough that its original authors are not remembered by name, only by the thing they left behind. The law is called, in the common galactic trade language, the Covenant of Sanctuary. In its original form, scratched into clay tablets by a species that has not existed for 9,000 years, it was shorter, rawer, dark. It said, essentially, some things must not be hunted. Some places must not be entered. Some lives must not be taken for any cause, under any circumstance, by any power. This is the line. It does not move. Over 9,000 years, the covenant grew. It acquired signatories, 47, currently, representing every major civilization in the known galaxy. It acquired administrative apparatus, the sanctuary authority, the warden corps, the monitoring networks. It acquired protocols, procedures, appeal processes, enforcement mechanisms. But at its core, 9,000 years on, it remained what it had always been. A line. And behind the line, the sanctuary worlds. 43 planets, in 31 systems, scattered across the galaxy's habitable zones. Worlds designated as inviolable refuges for endangered species, for displaced populations, for civilizations that had been broken by war or disaster or the ordinary cruelty of fate. Universe, and that needed a place to exist without fear while they rebuilt. The sanctuary worlds had been violated 17 times in 9,000 years. 12 of those violations had been resolved diplomatically. 3 had been resolved with economic sanctions. 2 had not been resolved at all, because the violating parties had been too powerful, and the Covenant had no enforcement mechanism equal to the threat. 2 worlds had burned. 2 populations had been lost. The Sanctuary Authority had filed reports, passed resolutions, expressed grave concern, done everything within the Covenant's administrative framework, which was substantial and sophisticated and completely inadequate against a civilization that had decided, after a calculation not unlike the Coelvereth's, that the benefits of violation outweighed the costs. And the Warden Corps, the peacekeepers, the monitors, the unarmed observers who staffed the sanctuary world perimeters and filed the reports and expressed the grave concern, had watched, because watching was all they were authorized to do. After the second burning, the authority had convened a summit. The summit had lasted 3 years. It produced a new provision to the Covenant. A single paragraph added to the enforcement section that had sat unused for 200 years because the Covenant's founding principles were clear. The sanctuary worlds were protected by law and consensus and the moral weight of 9,000 years of galactic civilization. They were not protected by soldiers, because soldiers meant violence, and violence was what the sanctuary worlds existed to escape. The paragraph said, in extremis, where diplomatic and economic measures have demonstrably failed to prevent imminent violation of sanctuary world protections, the authority may designate a warden force, a military unit authorized to act in direct defense of sanctuary populations. Applications to serve in this capacity must be submitted by member civilizations and approved by a 2/3 majority of the Covenant signatory. The paragraph sat unused for 200 years, not because the need didn't arise. The need arose 4 more times, because no civilization applied, not because they didn't care. Most of the Covenant signatories were genuinely committed to the sanctuary worlds in the way of civilizations that had built the commitment into their foundational documents and meant it at the time of writing. But a warden force was something different from a document. A warden force meant soldiers in the field, on worlds that some other power had decided were worth burning. It meant casualties. It meant the possibility of a wider war. It meant one civilization putting its own people between a sanctuary population and the thing that wanted to destroy them. And every civilization in the known galaxy, when it came to the moment of that calculation, found reasons not to be first. Until the humans. The application arrived at the Sanctuary Authority's administrative center on a Monday morning, which was not how anyone had expected the 200-year-old paragraph to finally be invoked. The authority secretary general was a Thal Mori named Velsan, who had held the position for 12 years, and who was, by inclination and training, a philosopher administrator, someone who thought carefully about large things and acted slowly and deliberately, and had built a reputation for precisely calibrated responses to complex situations. Velsan read the application twice. No, then called in their deputy. Then called in the authorities' legal team. Then sat quietly for a while and thought about what it meant that the application had been filed not by one of the ancient established military powers of the cooperative sphere, not by the Velthari with their long naval tradition, not by the Keth Vral whose warrior culture was legendary, not by any of the civilizations that the galaxy would have expected to be first, but by humanity. Humanity who had been in the galactic community for 40 years. Humanity who had joined the cooperative sphere as a peer contact barely 30 years ago. Humanity who was young by every galactic metric and who had, in those 40 years, compiled a diplomatic and cultural record that was extraordinary and occasionally baffling and consistently surprising, and had never, until this moment, involved anything that could be described as a military posture. The application was formal, precise. It cited the relevant paragraph, the specific sanctuary world currently under threat, Vareth 9, population 600,000, a displaced Keth Vral civilian population that had fled a civil conflict 40 years ago and had been living under sanctuary protection since. And the specific threat, a faction of that same civil conflict, now consolidated into a coherent military force that had announced its intention to resolve the exile permanently. The application included, as the paragraph required, a capability statement. What forces humanity proposed to contribute? Their training, equipment, command, structure, and rules of engagement. Velzan's legal team confirmed it was technically complete. Velzan's deputy asked the question that everyone in the room was thinking. Why them? Velzan looked at the application. Because they're the only ones who applied, they said. The vote was called within 72 hours, as the situation on Vareth 9 required. 31 of the 47 signatories voted. 22 in favor, 6 against, 3 abstentions. The Human Cooperative Sphere's application was approved. The Secretary General sent the formal notification. The response came back in 4 hours. Acknowledged. First elements will be at Vareth 9 in 72 hours. Wow. Please advise the sanctuary population that they are not alone. Senior Warden Kale Oze. No relation to the ambassador, though the name was common enough in that family's home region that people always asked, was 38 years old, and had spent 14 of those years in the Human Cooperative Sphere's defense forces, the last 6 as a senior officer in the newly designated Warden Force Contingent. What? He had not expected to be here. Not because he doubted the application would be approved. The legal team had been thorough. The capability statement was accurate, and the humanitarian case was unambiguous. He had not expected to be here, because 200 years of unused precedent was, in his professional estimation, a significant signal about the nature of the operation he was being asked to lead. When nobody applies for 200 years, there is a reason. He had read the files on the 4 previous sanctuary violations where the paragraph had not been invoked. He had read the after-action reviews, the diplomatic records, the reports from the unarmed Warden Corps, observers who had watched from their monitoring stations while the populations they were assigned to protect were destroyed. He had read those reports with the particular attention of someone who was planning to be in the same situation and intended to produce a different outcome. He brought 4 ships and 600 personnel, the sanctuary authorities, observers at Vareth 9. When he arrived at the system boundary and opened contact were, he noted carefully, several seconds after his identification. Warden Force, the observer lead, said finally. The voice had the quality of someone hearing something they had stopped expecting to hear. You actually came. Well, we said we would, Kale said. Another pause. We've been monitoring this situation for 8 months, the observer said. The diplomatic track has been, we've tried everything. The threatening force is not responding to. I've read the files, Kale said. What's the current position of their advanced elements? The observer gave him the tactical picture. He listened. He had a very good tactical team, and they had been studying the situation for 3 weeks and had built models. The models matched what he was hearing. He had hoped they would not, because the models suggested that the threatening force had specifically timed their advance to exploit the window between the authorities' latest diplomatic deadline and the point at which any external response could reasonably arrive. They had not expected a response to arrive this quickly. Kale made a note of that. It mattered. What is your authorization level? The observer asked. Full defensive mandate. Authority of the Covenant. He paused. We are here to stand between the population of Vareth 9 and the force that wants to destroy them. That's the job. We're going to do the job. Nero's L. He opened the channel to his ships. All elements. This is the commander. We have the tactical picture. We have the authorization. And we have 600,000 people on the ground who were told they are not alone. Wow. He paused. Let's make sure that's true. Warden Force, move to position. What happened in the Vareth 9 system over the next 9 days was documented in considerable detail by the sanctuary authorities, observers, by the tactical recorders aboard the Warden Force vessels, and by a Thal Mari, cultural historian named Sev Tan, who had been on the system's monitoring station for 3 years, and who had, with the particular instinct of someone whose civilization had spent 3,000 years recognizing the moments that would matter, begun keeping a personal record the moment the human ships came over the system boundary. The history Sevtan wrote took years to complete and is considered one of the definitive accounts of the engagement. It is taught in military academies and diplomatic training programs and history courses across 14 civilizations. It has been translated into 31 languages. Its opening paragraph reads, I had been watching for 3 years. I had filed reports. I had expressed grave concern. I had done everything the Covenant authorized me to do, which was considerable and insufficient. Peace. And then the humans came, and I understood, for the first time in my career, what the difference was between witnessing and standing. The threatening force, formally designated the Kethbral Reclamation Compact, a military organization that had been building toward this action for a decade, had superior numbers. Their fleet was larger than the Warden Force by a factor of 3. Their ground forces, already positioned in the outer system, outnumbered the human contingent significantly. What they did not have was the thing that the Warden Force had that KOC had identified as a decisive factor before a single shot was fired. They had not expected anyone to come. 200 years of precedent said no one would come. Every calculation the compact strategists had run, and they were sophisticated strategists, this had been planned for years, had accounted for diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, the sanctuary authorities' formal condemnation, and the unarmed warden courtship. Observers who would file detailed reports about everything that happened. None of their calculations had accounted for 600 people with a mandate and the intention to use it. The Compact's fleet commander opened contact with the warden force on the second day. The message was a standard challenge. Legal, under the Compact's own interpretation of the covenant, which their legal team had spent years constructing, claiming the right to retrieve their exiled population and return them to Keth Vral territory. Kale's response was 4 sentences. This population is under sanctuary protection, under the covenant of sanctuary, to which your government is a signatory. That protection is currently being exercised by an authorized warden force operating under a 2/3 majority vote of covenant member civilizations. We are not leaving. If you proceed, you will need to go through us. The last sentence was, technically, not in the approved diplomatic response template. His communications officer pointed this out. I know, Kale said. Send it anyway. The Compact's fleet held position for 6 hours. Yes. Then it advanced. What followed? The 9 days that Seutan documented, the 9 days that became the basis for 14 military academy curricula and 31 translations, was not, by the standard metrics of space combat, a large engagement. No worlds burned. No fleets were destroyed. The casualty figures were, in galactic terms, small. But it was fought with a quality that the galaxy had not seen deployed in defense of someone else's population in 200 years. On the third day, when the Compact's advance pushed through the outer system boundary, and the warden force moved to intercept, Kale addressed his people. The address was short. He was not given to speeches. But Sefton recorded it, and it has been quoted in 47 contexts since. He said, 600,000 people on that planet have been waiting for 40 years to go home. They can't go home yet. What they can have, right now, today, is the knowledge that when something came for them, something else came for them too. That the line exists. That the line holds. That they are not alone. He paused. That's why we're here. Not for glory. Not for the Compact's attention. Not for the history files. Another pause. For the 600,000. Every decision we make in the next 9 days, make it for them. The warden force held the line for 9 days. They were outgunned consistently and outmaneuvered twice and came very close, on the 6th day, to a position that Kale's tactical team assessed as critical. Moment when the geometry of the engagement and the Compact's numerical advantage converged in a way that the models had flagged as highest risk. On the 6th day, Kale made a decision. Not a tactical decision. His tactical team handled the tactical decision because they were extraordinary, and he trusted them completely and tactical. Decisions in a live engagement belong to the people with real-time situational awareness. The decision he made was simpler and harder than a tactical calculation. He opened a channel to the surface of Aerith 9, to the sanctuary population, the 600,000 who had been watching the engagement on whatever instruments they had in the particular quality of fear that belongs to people who have been in danger for a long time and have learned to live with it, but have learned to live with it, not stop feeling it. He said, over an open channel, that the Compact's fleet could also hear. Verith 9. This is Warden Force Command. Day 6. We are still here. The line is holding. You are not alone. End transmission. Forward here. He sent that message every day. Day 7. Still here. Line is holding. You are not alone. Day 8. Still here. Line is holding. You are not alone. Day 9. The day the Compact's fleet, facing a diplomatic collapse at home, triggered by the authorities' escalating response and the galactic community. Increasingly vocal reaction to the engagement began its withdrawal. Day 9, Kale sent the message one more time. Vareth 9. Getty. Warden Force Command. Day 9. They're leaving. The line held. You are not alone. You never were. Sevtan, writing that night in their personal record, described what it had been like to watch from the monitoring station. They wrote, I have been a historian of conflict for 30 years. I have studied battles larger than this one by every metric. I have never understood, until now, that the size of a battle is not the point. The point is the line. The point is who stands at it, and why, and what they say to the people behind it while they stand. The human said, You are not alone. Every day. Out loud. Where everyone could hear. I think that is the bravest thing I have ever witnessed. The formal after-action review by the Sanctuary Authority took 3 months and produced a report that ran to 400 pages and that Vel Son, upon completion, summarized in a single sentence for the authority's governing council. Org. They worked. Velson said. The Warden Force provision works. We just needed someone willing to use it. The governing council was quiet for a moment. What happens now? The Velthari representative asked. Now, Velsan said, we ask who else is willing to stand. The call went out to all 47 covenant signatories. The response in the weeks and months that followed was not unanimous. Several civilizations declined, with varying degrees of diplomatic language covering, varying degrees of genuine reluctance. Bought by several committed to observer roles, enhanced monitoring, faster diplomatic escalation, economic response mechanisms. Several, more than Velsan had expected, submitted full Warden Force applications. The Kethvral submitted an application. This was the one that surprised everyone the most. The Kethvral, whose civil conflict had created the Vareth 9 situation, whose reclamation compact had been new. The threatening force, whose exiled population had needed protecting. The Kethvral government submitted a formal Warden Force application with a capability statement that reflected 6,000 years of warrior culture and a cover letter that said, in its entirety, we know what it means to need the line to hold. We would like to be part of holding it. Belsan, read the Kethvral application 3 times. Then they sent a personal message to Kale Osi. It said, You started something. I thought you should know. Kale's response came back in a few hours. It said, We didn't start it. The Covenant started it 9,000 years ago. We just showed up. Glad others are showing up too. Then, after a pause, how's the population of Erith 9? Velzan checked the latest report from the surface. Easy. The 600,000 were doing what displaced populations do when the immediate threat is gone, beginning, slowly and carefully, the long work of figuring out what comes next. There were debates about whether to stay or go home. There were committee meetings and arguments and the particular civic energy of a people that had survived something and was now, for the first time in a long time, arguing about the future rather than their present danger. There was also, the observer's report noted this with what appeared to be genuine warmth, a ceremony. A small one. Not official. Not organized by any authority or government or administrative body. Just people, gathering at dusk on the largest open ground in the main settlement, facing the sky, facing the direction where the Warden Force ships had been. Velzan wrote back to Kale. They held a ceremony, facing your ships. The observer described it as, I'm reading from the report, an expression of gratitude that the observer found difficult to document adequately, as it appeared to involve a quality of feeling for which the standard reporting categories were insufficient. Oh, I believe the observer was trying to say that 600,000 people stood in the dark and looked at the sky and felt, perhaps for the first time in 40 years, that the universe was not simply indifferent. You did that. Cale read the message. He was on the bridge of a ship in the outer system, completing the withdrawal. The engagement was over. The forms were filed. The tactical debrief was scheduled. He looked at the planet on his view screen. He was quiet for a moment. Yani. Oh, Shani. Then he sent Velson one more message. Kirtan or sent Vel. Tell the observer. The feeling has a name. We call it not being alone. Humans have been working on that one for a long time. Glad we got to share it. In the sanctuary, authorities' administrative center, in the room where the enforcement section of the covenant is maintained and updated and periodic, reviewed the 200-year-old paragraph that had sat unused for 2 centuries, now has something new beneath it. It was added by Velson, who had the authority to add it, and who felt, after everything, that the record should be complete. The addendum is not long. It reads, this provision was first invoked in the 41st year of humanity's membership in the Cooperative Sphere. The invoking civilization was one of the youngest in the covenant. They were outgunned. They held the line for 9 days. They sent a message to the protected population every day of the engagement. The message was, you are not alone. The provision works. Applications are open. In a military academy, on a human world, in a course on the history of the Warden Force that has been taught every year since the Vareth 9 engagement, there is final lecture. The lecture does not cover tactics or logistics or command structure. It covers one question. Why did you apply? The answer, as generations of students have heard it, delivered by instructors who were there, or who trained under people who were there, is always the same. Because someone had to. Because the line was there and no one was standing at it. Because 600,000 people needed to hear that they were not alone. Because we are human and we have been afraid in the dark ourselves, and we know what it means to need someone to come. Because when the covenant asked who would stand, the only correct answer was, us. Us. And because, and this is the last thing the lecture says, the thing the instructors deliver last and quietly, when the formal teaching is done, and it is just people in a room together at the end of something, because every single time, in every dark, in every corner of this vast and complicated galaxy, when something comes for someone who cannot protect themselves, humanity wants to be the something that comes for them instead.